For the wire bending of the Z spring, begin firstly with the planning of the cast. The first line is the mid-palatal suture, and we work on the left side here. The active arm of the Z spring should be at the middle third at the contact area of the central incisor and represent the mesial-distal width of the central incisor. First of all, begin with the straightening of the wire. The wire of the Z spring is 0.5 millimeter. The first bend is the non-traumatic coil. The non-traumatic coil should be upward or incisally in relation to the active arm. After making a small non-traumatic coil should be squeezed to be small. Here the non-traumatic coil. Now the direction of non-traumatic coil should be incisally in relation to the incisor. Now the mesial-distal width of the central incisor is equal to the active arm. So here I have to stabilize the active arm and marking the position of the first coil. The first coil should be upward, that meaning the round beak is toward you and the marking is out of the player. Okay? Now the non-traumatic coil should be parallel with the slot of the player or upward, and the first coil should be toward you. The diameter of the coil is 2 to 3 millimeter. It should be at the end of the beak of the player. The first coil toward you and should be went upward. That means it pass above the active arm. Okay? Flipping off your player, and by the same method complete your coil. Here you can see the first coil is upward in relation to the active arm. Now complete your coil. Here is the first coil. The active arm down, the first coil upward. The second coil in opposite direction to the first coil and should be downward. Again, at the level of the active arm. Sorry. Here, either by the player or you can first determine the position of the second coil should be parallel with the end of the active arm, like this. Okay? Again, the marking is outward, and at the end of the player you have to adjust. The first coil should be horizontal, not tilted, and the wire perpendicular to the active arm, and now the second coil is downward, okay? Flipping your player, downward, and again complete your coil. This is the Z spring, like the letter of Z. First, the active arm, the first coil upward, the second coil downward, and now before completing the retentive tag, we have to closing the active arm with the second coil and the retentive tag with the first coil to be passive. Like this. And here the Z spring. Okay. Now for making the retentive tag should be 2/3 of the distance between the two coils. This is the first coil and second coil. 2/3 of the distance at that point, and make a right angle bend. To be here, like this. Okay. So the retentive tag should be perpendicular to the level of the two coils. Now make a small U-loop, like this. Okay. Active arm, two coils, right angle bend, small U-loop. Now begin with your zigzag. The zigzag, as you learn, 1 from the inside of the active arm, 2 from the inside of the right angle bend, 3, and the final zigzag is 4. This is the zigzag. Now you see that the zigzag is not parallel to the mid-parietal suture, and should be adapted to the palate, and the end of the zigzag either upward or cut it. This is your Z spring. The action of Z spring like this. Okay, the active arm upward, 2 coils horizontal, and end with the zigzag.
Point 5.